Hi, David Sanders, the sheriff of Camas County in Fairfield, Idaho. Small little county nestled in between Boise and Sun Valley. Population is about 12 to 1400, depending on their recreational days, summer or winter. Pretty small county. Been in law enforcement since 1993. Started out in Butte County, where I was, raised. Wasn't born there, but raised from a young age. And law enforcement wasn't in my career path or anything. Never thought twice about it. And in about graduated in 1991, I was raised in a Christian home, and you were taught to do the right thing and to help others and just take care of your neighbors and take care of people. So I was raised in a mechanic background, worked on cars, painted, that kind of stuff most of my youth. So I was getting older. My parents kept a pretty good, I guess you'd call it a thumb on me, of you just don't go out and hang out with your friends after dark, because my dad had an infamous saying of nothing good happens after dark. And man, was that hard as a kid to take that, just not understanding what he meant. And as I got older, of course, I was able to have my first beer with my father at about 30 and have to begrudgingly tell him that he was right. There was no good. Anyways, I was painting radiation boxes for INL and working in a body shop and hanging out with who I thought were good friends. And it's weird when you move out and have your own apartment, the amount of friends you get, worse versus before. And so I was, every teenage kid, partying and just having fun with life. And eventually, I had a pretty horrific accident with a friend that we were going to a gravel pit party, and a friend and his friends were in front of us driving. Had his little brother in the car with myself and another good friend, and unfortunately watched them as they were drinking and driving. We weren't, but as they were drinking and driving, they ran off a corner and ran off the road. So we stopped, ran down there, and found the car on its top. And my best friend and the bigger brother of the kid with us was in the middle of the seat. And as they went off the hill, the fence posts on the fence came through the windshield and right through my friend, and just went through him and impelled him and the seat hanging upside down. And at that point, I started thinking that, this isn't the best path to be taking as a kid. It was a pretty hard lesson, and learning from it, thinking I should try do something different. And about that time, the sheriff in Arco in Butte County, where I started, had pulled me aside. He was family friends and was close neighbors to me as a youngster and as my family. And he pulled me aside and essentially said, "Hey, you're a good kid. You come from a good family and background. And I just don't really think the kids that you're hanging out with and some of the choices that I see, not that I was a bad kid still, but I could see from according to him, I could see you doing and going down the wrong road, and let me offer you something. Why would you come out and ride with the deputies and see if this would be a career path or something else to enlighten you or do something different with?" And that was in probably late 92. And I rode around for a few months. And back in those days in law enforcement, it was a lot different. And then, within probably 3 weeks or a month of riding around, and I qualified, with my firearm with him and shot. He gave me a badge and a spare car, and I was off working part time. I worked during the day, and then I worked all the night shifts and weekends, and got really close with the sheriff and the deputies over there in Arco, and really loved doing this. I love helping people. I was raised in that background that you help others before yourself for the most part, and that you just needed to do the right thing. And I was really thankful and appreciative of the sheriff at that point, changing my life opportunities.
Hey, Dave, how old were you when you started?
I was 20.
And what was your uh, educational background at that point?
At that point, I had just graduated in 91 from Butte County High School.
Okay. All right. And so you go from Butte, and how do you end up here in Camas?
Funny story. So I worked there for about a year, and the sheriff helped me get into the CSI program because it was a long post academy type deal then, or you could go. The colleges were starting these law enforcement programs. So I could just go down for a year through CSI and obtained a certification for law enforcement. So he assisted me in getting that done. And I was down at CSI, and gosh, I was already deputized and had quite a bit of experience. So I did a lot of ride-alongs with Twin Falls County and Twin Falls City, and was going to school down there and finishing things up, and was offered jobs and testing with the county and the city because I'd been riding with them so much during the FTO program through CSI. And as a young broke college kid, I seen some job offers, and the Harold Lee, the old sheriff up here, had inquired down at CSI looking for a deputy. So I come up and interviewed, and I took the first job that was available. Twin Falls was still a little ways out on hiring, and so I just took this job, and I'm like, gosh, this is a pretty small place. Would be a great place to start and get things kicked off and going, and then I stayed.
And just for a little bit of perspective, can you talk about how big Camas County actually is?
Camas County's 1,068 square miles. We have about 650,000 federal acres, and then less than 300,000 of private.
And how many people are in the county?
Depending on the recreational day, I think the census is around 1179, I think, so about 1,200, but there's always somebody skiing, snow machining, motorcycle riding, camping up in there. We have a huge, huge federal county that has a lot of recreational purposes.
Okay. So when you started this job, can you kind of give me an idea of what kind of things you dealt with as a beginning deputy?
Oh gosh, a new deputy was the sheriff and I, because at that point, within 6 months of being hired, the chief deputy ran against the sheriff and lost. And at that point, it was a busy place. Highway 20 is a busy highway, 55 miles an hour, and it was the sheriff and I. And that was it, writing 15, 20 citations a day, and just a lot of traffic offenses and not necessarily huge criminal offenses in the county at that point, just a lot of traffic.
Okay. And as you progressed and as time has progressed with you in Camas, have you noticed a difference in crime as opposed to writing a lot of citations and everything else? Have you had to deal with different things over time now?
Oh, of course. The pain of growth for any community county, we're not growing like the rest of Idaho. We have quite a few new housing developments and houses built, but they're mainly retired. But we get a lot of influx from Blaine County. They can't afford to live over there. They come over here and unfortunately deal with some of their problems. The retired portion of the community is pretty quiet, but we deal with a lot of that, which deal with a lot of civil issues between neighbors and some disorderly conduct type stuff, a few domestics. I mean, just because we're a small county doesn't make us exempt from everything that goes on in the bigger counties.
Okay, and so as time has progressed, are you seeing more severe crime, or are you kind of insulated from that being in a small community? For example, are you dealing with any narcotics and homicides and rape, stuff like that?
Oh gosh, a sheriff that says that does not have a drug problem in his county is a damn liar. Drugs are everywhere this day with the other states surrounding us having the marijuana usage, or whether medical or recreational. I mean, every county has that. But thank goodness we're pretty isolated in this smaller community where everybody knows everybody. So the drug stuff is pretty minimal. We have some regular daily users and the little things we deal with, but the big crimes like in the other surrounding counties, we don't deal with that, thank goodness.
So I take it you're not seeing the problem with fentanyl that other counties are seeing then?
No, at least to my knowledge of the deputies, no, we don't see that kind of stuff, just a lot of personal marijuana usage.
Okay. And so how does it transition to the point where you have been a deputy, and I don't know at what point in your career that you decide, hey, I think I'm going to run for sheriff?
That's a funny story, because I've been here about 7 years, and the old sheriff retired, Harold, and then the new sheriff took over, made it about a year into his term, and it wasn't what he wanted, needed. It was just tearing him down. So I went from being a deputy for a few months and then technically the senior deputy, chief deputy after that, because I was the only deputy, and dealing with things like that. To in 2001, the sheriff just up and resigned, and December of 2001, then I took over, was appointed as sheriff until the next election in 2004.
And so you've been sheriff here since 2004 then?
I've been appointed sheriff since December of 2001, and then I ran and won my first election in 2004.
And can you kind of give people an explanation in terms of how Idaho sheriffs work? Are you appointed for life? Are you elected every so often? How does that work?
It's a very political piece, actually. The sheriff runs on a 4-year term, and we run on the same term as the presidential elections. So every presidential election, every sheriff in every county has to run. Where I was appointed early, anybody appointed in an elected official's position has to run in the next general election. And so I was able to skate through and not hit the 2002 election, and then I ran in 2004.
Okay. Can you kind of talk a little bit about, because you're in such a small community, what's it like being sheriff, knowing that you have to be reelected every 4 years, and yet maybe dealing with some people in the community that, you know, maybe you've had to arrest them, and then later on you're, you know, trying to run for your job. How does that work?
That's hard, and it's very hard and interesting for especially a small county sheriff where I don't have any understaff. I have 3 deputies. When I first started, I had 2. Our crime load, is an interesting point, was around 100 cases a year, which is just reportable, not the stuff we did on a daily basis, but the actual reports we did and crimes we prosecuted. And by 2006-07, right in there, our crimes went over like 250 cases, which, you know, was well over double to what we usually do. So I was able to justify and get a 3rd full-time deputy appointment. So I have 3 full-time deputies, 2 full-time dispatchers, and then 2 part-time. Then I have hit and miss other dispatch part-time people, and then my deputies, I have a couple other deputies from surrounding counties that help out to cover shifts, because with 4 of us total, that doesn't cover 24/7. So it's a real big uphill battle trying to do that. So it makes myself, as a small sheriff, a working sheriff, where you wear a uniform and you take calls at night when the deputies are gone. If one guy's gone, the other's taking and using comp time or earning comp time on the backside. So that means I'm out working. So I'm out writing citations, responding to calls, arresting people. And unfortunately, the same people that unfortunately break the law, either by a traffic offense or something major, that I have to go out and deal with them and correct their behaviors, or try to, and or help them, because I really firmly believe in trying to help people through these situations. Because a lot of times you can set people up for failure where they just screw it. They don't want to try anymore because it's just always down on them. So trying to do that, and then every 4 years having to run again, makes it a very tough job, unique job for a small county, because it doesn't take long to piss one person off, and that means their 10 friends. And my first 2 terms actually had a guy run against me. Out of my 5 elections I've been through, the first 2 I was opposed and had to do the full election, which it makes you try and really want the job to go through that, because you just never know.
So you mentioned just a second ago that you have about, well, I don't know what it is now, but you were basically getting to about 200, 250 cases per year that made you need another deputy. Of those 200, 250 cases, what kind of cases? Is it still mainly patrol, traffic tickets, or can you give me a flavor of what kind of things you have to deal with up here?
I gonna guess, and I hate using the word guess, but I'm gonna assume that there is around 70-75% of it's always traffic, because Highway 20 is a big highway. A lot of people avoid the interstates and use these back roads now, and so it's just a lot of traffic complaints. But the rest of them are still pretty significant. We still have our domestics and the big fights, and just the day-to-day stuff that everybody else deals with.
Okay. Are there any stories that kind of stick out in your mind, in either from the beginning or in the middle or in the end of things that you had to deal with?
Oh gosh, I have a ton. I've been here a long time, and seen and done. I've been able to see a lot of cool things, do a lot of cool, do a lot of not so cool things. But you would just think in a small county that you just deal with the little things. But within 10 months of being appointed sheriff, I had a murder and a shooting within 10 months. And so, that was a pretty significant crime. And trying to deal with it, a small county with not much population, tax base, so our equipment, our funding, that kind of stuff really cuts into what law enforcement can do, unfortunately. So you have to think outside the box and really relate and have a good working relationship with your surrounding bigger sheriffs to come and help with that. I had a couple people die, ended me up, within the first 10 or 11 months. The dean of graduates from Washington State University and her husband, who was a big cardio surgeon in Seattle, a really windy day like today, but a lot of snow, built up a big cornice above their house, and it avalanched and completely engulfed the bottom of their cabin, consuming them in their bed, and their grandkids and kids were upstairs, and it got snow on them, but it trapped the parents down there. They suffocated and died. And
Wow.
so within that huge thing, being a small county, I was on Good Morning America Live, NBC Nightly News, about 15 radio talk shows in Washington, and I went from I'm just a small little sheriff that's minding my own business, and hey, things aren't so bad, to I was on every national media thing, but it was good exposure. Really relating with what the other sheriffs on that side have to deal with the news and what it goes on and what to do with it. And I was able to, in the early days, at that point, I appointed at 28 years old. I'm 29 by now, and being on all these national news and learning how to deal with the media and take care of things. It was very learning and fun.
And when you deal with the other sheriffs, do you get an idea of maybe how, I guess the word is insulated you may be compared to, like, say, the Ada County of sheriff of Ada County, where the population is so much bigger and he has to deal with so much more. Do you get an idea of how insulated you are, and do you get to kind of coordinate with those guys and kind of figure out how to deal with bigger problems that you may not necessarily have to deal with?
Oh, 100%. We meet a lot, and I'm a pretty open, talkative sheriff. So I was, as soon as I hit the ground running as sheriff, within 4 years I was on the Sheriff's Association board. I ended up being the president of the whole Sheriff's Association, and it just made me step outside of my small county sheriffing stuff to deal with the bigger sheriffs and represent the entire state. So I had a good working relationship with those other sheriffs, and those bigger sheriffs is very political. They're dealing with the news, the media, and the public, but the day-to-day crime stuff and dealing with employees, they have staff, command staff, to take care of those things, which is nice. But they have a lot more politics and crime that they have to be attentive to, versus myself here doing all the day-to-day stuff and disciplining the same employee that you try and keep happy. And it's a small county, there's just not a huge pool, and so I want to make things work with my employees. And I went, gosh, probably close to 14 years with almost all the same employees. So I'm hoping that I'm kind of doing something right to keep employees for that long.
So you started your law enforcement career in 1993, and during that time, up until now, how has law enforcement, how has working in law enforcement affected your family life, and maybe your views on dealing with people and society in general?
Oh gosh, I want to be a well digger because it's a big, deep subject here. I'll tell you what. Things have changed. The mentality, just people in general, the outtake of day-to-day life form, the struggles, COVID, that kind of stuff. But it hasn't just been COVID, it's been everything. They've been pushed to question authority, which there's nothing wrong with that within reason. But the old days, you were there to help, and you wrote traffic citations, and you helped old ladies change tires on the side of the road. You packed their groceries in, and I'm very community service oriented here. So if they're locked out of their car or their house, or you drive by and you just see snow on their sidewalk, you stop and shovel their driveway, their sidewalks off. And that's really what I liked about the job, not necessarily the huge crime and the publicity of it, is just the backstory of being a true community service person and trying to take care of it. That worked good in the early days, and now you just have to be careful on how much you do and what you do. You start shoveling somebody's sidewalk or help them out, then the neighbor across the street, well, isn't that abuse of taxpayers' money because you're shoveling their walkway and they could pay somebody? And that's kind of the mentality of a lot of stuff that's changing, and it's not the same when I started to now. Things are totally different. And with your family, it's hard, especially in a smaller community, because you have to go and you want to go to all the games to support your kids and the other kids. And it's a political side. You want to be out, seen in the public doing things. And sometimes, or I guess not even sometimes, I can just openly admit as a smaller sheriff or any other sheriff that we get stuck trying to appease our job, our family at work, and trying to make things work, and we kind of forget about our families at home, and it's a tough thing. You have to have family the end of the day to make it through this job. You cannot do this by yourself.
So, being in a small town like this, do you find it difficult to hold on to quality deputies?
Oh, 100%. 100%, because of the pay, the training, the resources, the equipment, everything there. Everybody, like when I was younger, wanted to start out and you wanted to do a lot, see a lot, and when you don't have the money to help people survive, where their wives have to work too, and the newer, nicer equipment. And one of the bigger things I've struggled here was with promotions. Everybody wants to do more and take on more responsibilities and that kind of stuff. And in a smaller office, you can't. I've had to run it where I can't have command staff, somebody to take care of things, because as it is in the community as a sheriff, I'm the only one they want to talk to. They call me at home. They call me. They stop me at the store. They stop me anywhere in town to talk about what's going on. So that interfects with your family life, and your employees are the same way. They don't want somebody else they work side by side with disciplining or telling them what they should or shouldn't do. It makes it hard. I'm supposed to be the final decision, but in my opinion, I need to be the first one too, because it's hard for them to be disciplined by a fellow employee and not necessarily a true administrative staff person.
How has training changed for you in the department over the years? I mean, you look at some of these larger departments where they get all sorts of funding and they can do all sorts of training. What type of training did you start with? Have you been able to get more for not only yourself, but for your deputies? And what kind of training are you getting up here?
Oh gosh, another big subject. Yeah, in the early days, the Post Academy and other places promoted and had better training because it didn't cost as much to get them in there. And then everybody started going to their own interdepartmental training officers and in-service training, so they spent the money to promote and to train their people to do all this. So all of the little things that went to post went away. So now for us, it costs quite a bit. A lot of your basic training is a $300 to $400 fee just for the training per person. And then you have to pay for their meals and lodging and all that kind of stuff. So it costs quite a bit, especially for a smaller department to leave. Plus, I'm trying to either pay another person part-time to cover while they're gone, or having to build comp time for another deputy while he stays home instead of sending everybody.
If you had a bigger budget, what type of training would you end up sending your deputies to?
Just the basic police stuff, because sometimes we get busy doing so much of the day-to-day stuff that some of those things get overlooked because we're doing them daily but not training on them, if that makes any sense. The interview and interrogation piece, we kind of sit into our way, but we don't learn any newer ways. Especially as older dogs, this is how it's always worked for us. So we do that, but there are newer ways, better ways, and sometimes we kind of forget that those kind of trainings are out there. But for me, it's hard to send my guys to that kind of stuff because it costs quite a bit, and they're leaving the outskirts of the state, and sometimes you have to even leave the state of Idaho for these better trainings, and it's just not economically justifiable for a person in my small of a community to do those kind of things, because we should be doing legal updates, which we do with our prosecutor, and a few little things, but there's definitely more a broader spectrum of things that go on than just here. And I get stuck, unfortunately, just trying to train the guys for what happens here, which isn't the bigger picture.
So, but in terms of if there was, and I guess maybe you already answered this, but if there was a specific thing that you could send all your deputies to, would there be anything specific that's kind of the latest and greatest that you need to deal with? Or it's one of those things where you're in such a small department that you kind of need a plethora of everything?
I see where you're going. Yeah, you need a plethora of everything, but the interview and interrogation is a big deal. The sex crimes, because it is a day-to-day basis. Thank goodness we're fairly insulated from that, but it still happens here. And then the computer crimes, which deals with a lot of the sex crimes, the computer stuff, the cell phone downloading, and that kind of stuff. There's absolutely no way we could afford the equipment or technology to do those, and we do have those things. Today's a horrible modern day where everything's on a computer, so everything is being scanned by phone, computers, the advantage taken of, the pictures, the sex crime stuff for the kids and that we just can't. I have to have another county come in and help, or have the state help us with it.
For your deputies, is there a minimum hiring standard? Do you have a specific educational standard that you want your deputies to handle, or how do you handle hires around here?
That's harder for a small county because, of course, you want very educated and train worthy type people. Somebody that's not close-minded to do that, and we just don't pay that kind of money to get those things. So my standards are probably lower than most other counties, but I want the biggest thing is somebody with personality. You can get by with some of the other things, but it's how you treat people and conduct yourself is the main thing, because that's the biggest focus in police. It's not what they do for their job, it's what they're doing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It's the public interaction, because they arrested somebody and did things. Doing their job isn't what I believe is highlighted in the world today. It's what they're doing to do their jobs. It's that other side of things that unfortunately just scours of what we do on a day-to-day basis, trying to do the right thing.
Have you noticed, obviously in recent years there was a little bit of social unrest. Did you notice any change up here, or no? I mean, people are in general kind of like the police and support you and the job that you guys do just because it's such a small community.
Yes, and we do have a small community. They're very, very supportive of us. And some of it where we're still a smaller, remote county that we can still show and do that community service portion of it, showing that we're here for them, that we're not those kind of things. And so it helps. But on that side, to elaborate a titch more, we don't have to deal with the day-to-day crap, right? This bad thing on the video, but you said to talk open, that you after a while it sours you, it burns you out. Even I've gotten to the position, pushing almost 30 years of this, that unfortunately I feel and see myself using my mouth before my ears. And hopefully that's a good analogy, but we catch ourselves when we're younger. You listen more and try and do that, and as you get older and you deal with the bad stuff all the time every day, that you quit looking at the good stuff. Sometimes you forget about it, and you just, unfortunately, we focus on the bad stuff every day instead of, hey, let's do this. Well, then you get irritated because they're irritated, and sometimes they just want to come in and vent a little bit, So I can see a big change in it. It's hard.
Kind of one last question. What would you like people to know? Say if I'm sitting here watching this video in New York or Los Angeles, in a really big city, what would you like people to know about the difference in policing that happens in a small community like yours versus in a large city as in a New York or a Los Angeles?
Good question. There is a difference. There's a huge difference in the mentality and the people versus me to there. And for a smaller sheriff picture to show them that, hey, there are still law enforcement everywhere, not just here, but everywhere, that still believe in community service and doing the right thing and helping people. I mean, that's our job ultimately, is to be able to help and guide people through these situations. That we have to take that piece and not just do our job and walk away. That we're able to, in a smaller community like this, step around the sideline and still help with those kind of things, knowing they're struggling with things that we know and can help, and we don't get overwhelmed with the everyday bad, the huge sex crimes, the batteries, the mental abuse, the elderly stuff that these guys in these bigger departments do, that it wears on you, and it doesn't here, thank goodness, because we don't deal with a lot of that kind of stuff. So, I just really like to show or say that we still do those bigger things, but it gives us more time to still have some community outreach and community help, that we're still there to help, that we're not the bad guys.
Okay, so Dave, we talked a little bit about policing in a small community, and you had mentioned a story that I think is very interesting and kind of indicative about what it's like to be a sheriff in a small community. Can you talk about that story?
Of course. Yeah, it's mental illness. I mean, that's a huge piece of every law enforcement's day-to-day stuff, is dealing with this. And years ago, after getting appointed as the sheriff, not even elected, we had a kid that was moved from New York here that had been institutionalized, and his family kind of give up on him, didn't know what to do. We were trying to get temporary guardianship through the court system, which isn't a quick deal, and in trying to deal with this. In the meantime, the kid had nowhere to live, no food to eat, was just kind of bumming around. And so my wife, my girls, were very family oriented. They made him cookies and bread, so I gave him some to eat, and I would let him sleep in our little tiny jail cell, and I just leave the door unlocked so he could come and go as he wanted to, but to give him somewhere to stay, because I didn't want to push that piece. And thank goodness I was able to form a relationship with him for the most part, or an understanding, because a relationship's a bigger word, but be able to understand each other. And unfortunately, he got pushed to that point one day, and we do not know why, but a guy showed up at a little golf course north of town to put a gate on the front there, and couldn't find the owner, and heard some commotion out back out on the grass, and found this kid standing over the top of him with hands and feet, and had beat him severely. And the guy called the sheriff's office saying, "Hey, I need some help. I think this guy's dead." And of course, I had just taken over. I had one deputy and myself. My deputy was off duty and gone, so it left me here. So as I'm hauling butt up the creek to try and find this person and get things taken care of, I have my office calling for another deputy that lived in our county, that worked for Blaine County, to come and help me if he was even home. So I show up, the kid standing over the guy and had physically beat him to death. The nose was gone, don't know how much graphic, but you could obviously tell that the guy was dead. And so looking at him, forming facts, did you do this? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. At this point, it's just me. The guy that called it in hightailed it after I'd got there, because he was scared. And so, luckily I had that understanding relationship with him, going, hey, I need you to put your hands behind your back and turn around. And he said, yeah, I got a knife in my boot, but I didn't use it. But since it's you, Dave, he called me by my first name, I will. And he turned around and just stood there with his hands behind his back. So I was able to get some cuffs on him, get him under control, and then locked into a back of a patrol car, while I had other county sheriffs, again, with a major crime in a small county like this, coming to help me get things taken care of.
What ended up happening to him?
Oh my gosh, that was a long story. With mental illness the way it is anywhere, but especially Idaho, there was nowhere to go. And of course, he was mentally ill, so he could never be charged criminally. So he spent almost 18 years in the safe haven in Blackfoot South, and he spent what his criminal years would have been for a criminal offense like that. And when they got to that point, they didn't know what else to do, so they released him into safe haven, which is kind of a supervised home living, and he's still there to this day over around Blackfoot or Pocatello.
Wow. Okay. And you had another story that you wanted to share as well. Can you do that?
Oh yes, just small county sheriff. Was in my early days here a lot by myself, trying to get deputies. When I started here, just a tidbit of things, I started out at $1,375 a month, and it wasn't that many years later I was sheriff. And the pay still wasn't that much better. And so it was hard to find anybody. So I was here a lot by myself. Like we were talking, the struggles on your family being gone and dealing with everything, trying to take care of your community. But middle of the night, get another call, some off duty cop from Caldwell was coming off the mountain with his family, and he was over hunting in fall time over around Methodist camp, and was driving down the road, and next thing you know, they remember the driver's side window shattering out of the pickup, and a bullet come through and hit him in the neck, the off-duty officer. And so they had got on top because there's no cell service, no communication. So they drove about 25 or 30 minutes, I'm assuming at least at the rate of speed, to get to the top of Couch Summit where the cell service would work, and then would call and say, hey, we're hunting and there's been a shooting. So we're assuming, because we get them most years, that somebody shot their leg or their foot because they forgot to take the bullet out of their hunting rifle, and were put it in a backpack or pickup. And, by myself, deputy was off at that point because it wasn't 3 months later, to meet the ambulance and them up on Couch Summit, and finding the story that they were just driving down the road and their driver's window shot out, and it severed half or three-quarter of his carotid and esophagus, and he survived. They were able to get a helicopter in here and get him to Boise, and he had about a 30% disability, but he survived. And the horrible thing is in the state of Idaho at that point, there wasn't a felony to shoot at a moving car. It was the felony to shoot from a moving car. So it ended up just being a misdemeanor charge, and the kid only spent the misdemeanor time in jail.
So who ended up doing the shooting? Did you find him?
We found him. I'm here by myself, had no clue what's going on. So I run over the mountain, small community. I know everybody, all the surrounding cops. This is a very big hunted and recreational area. So I knew that there was some sheriff from Gooding County and some ISP and other guys at their cabins and campsites, because they always tell me where they're at. So I had to go about 3 o'clock in the morning and start knocking on cabin doors and tents going, Dave, don't shoot me, but get your gun. I need your help. And I was able to gather about 7 of us to go sit on a cabin where they had told me this shooting had happened, to unfortunately find out the next morning as the 2 kids that left weren't there quite legally, but they were 2 local kids, and they were just drunk target practicing towards the road, not paying attention, and it had ricocheted and went through that guy's pickup window and shot the passenger.
Wow. Policing in small town Idaho.
Yes, 100%. And the woes of, the somewhat broken system sometimes, because who would have thought that, we could show that he intentionally was shooting, with no regard to the road or anything, shooting towards the road, and still only have a misdemeanor crime out of it in those days.
And so a misdemeanor got him how much time?
Anything? A year. Yep.
Okay. Sheriff Sanders, really appreciate the talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.